Welcome inside Black and Gold. Steve Geller along with Jeff Nowak on a disappointing 2-1 edition after the Saints fall 18-17 in Green Bay. The team having a 17-0 lead going into the fourth quarter, and then a bunch of doom and gloom followed that I'm sure we'll get into a bunch. Jeff, how was the trip out to Wisconsin at least?
I don't know what you're talking about. That was a great trip. Nothing went wrong. Everything, no, that was terrible. Anyway, so yeah, it's funny, like the trip to Wisconsin, I was back by 8:00 and I was like, man, I guess I could do a live chat. But then I was like, no one needs that. Emotionally, it's not going to help anybody. Let's wait until tomorrow and we're going to record something a little more established. I gotten a chance to go through some of the game. I haven't gone through all of the game. It's just, this was, I talked after week 1 about how much fun it was going through the film. Not the case. Not the case this time.
I can imagine.
So we're gonna go. This is gonna be a similar episode, but I do want to do things a little differently because normally we would start with the stock up players. No, I'm not starting with the stock up players. We're gonna start with the stock down players. And then I want to spend the second segment talking about Derek Carr's injury. We got a great interview on WWL this morning. Tommy Tucker did with Dr. David Elias. So I'm going to play you kind of a cut of that interview, give you some information on the injury Derek Carr's dealing with, and then we can kind of talk about what our expectations are for Jameis this week, whatever. Then we are going to do stock up in the final segment. It's going to be a shorter segment, but it's not all bad, right? Like there were some positives to take away from this game. When I say that on Twitter, people are like, how dare you? But, they were up 17 at halftime. They were up 17-0 in the fourth quarter. It wasn't all bad. So there are a few players that I want to highlight, and we can kind of get into that. The season's not over. It's 2-1, right? Like if you talk to someone before the season and you said Alvin Kamara is out 3 games, what would you hope to see from a record perspective? Would you accept 2-1? Of course you would. Obviously, you wouldn't want to bake in a quarterback injury, but that's why you kept Jameis around. Like in terms of backup quarterback play over the last few years, I think they're in probably the best situation they've been in, other than maybe the year you had Teddy and he went 5-0. Like this is why you have him here. So we're going to get into that. First things first, though, some levity. I told you that there was a really awkward story so when I was out in Green Bay, and I'm just glad that this didn't end up on the broadcast. Heck, it might have. I didn't watch it. But Jimmy Graham's touchdown. So I'm standing in the back of the end zone. And so you know how this works. Like you have a mic pack and I have it on my belt. Like I have it on my side on my belt, right? And the headphones are plugged into that. I'm there. I'm in the back of the end zone. In the replay of the Jimmy Graham touchdown, you can actually see my hand with the mic. Like you can see this mic flag. So you can tell I'm right there, but I'm just out of the frame, thankfully. And so what happened is Jimmy scored. And so he comes through the back of the end zone. He's spiking it. And so I'm backpedaling to get out of the way because I don't want to get run over by the behemoths on the field. And that would cause a scene. Anyway, but in Lambeau, it's an old stadium. So everything's old. They got bleachers. There's one tunnel in and out of the stadium. And the nets, the kicking nets, are just kind of sprawled over the ground. Like there's no place for them. Like most stadiums will have kind of a receptacle or an area. So they're not just all over the place with people tripping over them. Not at Lambeau. So what happens is I'm backing up to get out of the way of the players because that's what you're supposed to do. And they start raising the kicking net. Well, the net goes in under my mic pack and gets caught on the mic pack.
Whoa.
I am stuck. They're pulling the net up. And I'm like, wait, I got to get this out. And like the guy's like, he's trying to help me. But it's like, basically I'm caught in a fishing net. Like if you throw a net over somebody and they're like flailing to get out, that was me, except it was the mic pack. And so I'm like, I can't lose the mic pack. If the mic pack goes up and falls and breaks, how am I supposed to do my job? So I end up like panicking and just yanking the mic pack and breaking the clip off, which also breaks my headphones.
Oh.
And so, but I'm just thankful. Like, then the clip goes up and the guy's like, well, you can get it when it comes back down. I'm like, it's trash. What are you talking about? I don't need that. I can't fix that. And then, so I'm just, thankfully I had another pair of headphones in my bag So I just went over to the bag, put the headphones in, and kind of kept going as if nothing had ever happened. But like, I'm just glad that didn't end up on the broadcast somehow, because man, that was embarrassing. Let me tell you.
That sounds like something for sure. And yeah, I can imagine that panic, because it's like, yeah, your equipment obviously is everything. And
like,
thankfully you had a spare headphones.
Well, it's not even that. It was like in my head, I was like, I need to figure this out quickly, because at a certain point, people are going to start asking, why is there a delay? Why haven't they kicked the extra point yet? And then they're going to be like, because that idiot's caught in the net.
Oh, there's a broadcaster on the field who's packed up.
Well, because like you saw that there was a point in the game where it got delayed like 10 minutes because the spider cam,
right.
Are
you sure that wasn't you?
Right. Well, it almost was. And then on like, this is almost like a national broadcast, and they were like, we have a slight delay because this idiot is caught in the net. Oh my God. I never even told Robert, our engineer. I tried to tell him on the field, but it was so difficult. It was just so convoluted to explain that I was like, you know what? Never mind. I'll explain this to you next week when I hand you the mic pack and there's no clip on it anymore.
In pieces.
Anyway, so I hope, just to lighten the tension here before we get into the real bad stuff. You never warned me about that.
No, hey, you've had a great and a heart-pounding first couple games to start your sideline experience.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Anyway, I don't even think I don't think I was very good on the broadcast in general, and it was partly because I was so flustered after that point.
I thought you gave out tons of good stuff.
Yeah. Well, I was telling you before, like my pregame kind of scene setter, I was like kind of self-conscious about it because I decided to talk about special teams, and I was like, this is Blake Grupe's first game kicking outside. There's a little breeze coming in end to end, not just saying that this comes down to a kick. And then I was like, that's kind of lame. No one's listening to the broadcast being like, oh yeah, let's go. Kicking game, baby. But then, hey, when you know it, that came in. I think if there's no wind, he makes that kick. But all right, let's go. Let's start with the 3 down here. Can you guess what my first down is, Steve?
The entire offensive line.
You got it.
Hey.
I mean, geez. Like, we were talking about this before you came on. You said, oh, the offensive line is offensive. I think it's dangerous. Like, I think people are getting hurt because the offensive line isn't good enough. And I was saying, like, Jameis is out there, and this has nothing to do with Jameis. I think there's a point where you have to consider starting Taysom Hill, and for no reason in terms of the quality of play. I'm worried about Jameis. Like, I at least I know Taysom can move around and protect himself, and he's a sturdy guy. He's used to taking hits. Like, we saw Jameis get teed off on in a couple of games last year. Season over, right? Like, at Atlanta, he hurts his back against the Bucs, his foot, and then all of a sudden he is hobbled and you can't do it. And I mean, it's got to get better. It's atrocious. And you're talking about a sack per quarter. That's unheard of, even from bad offensive line groups, let alone a group that has 4 first-round draft picks on it.
That's the real disturbing part, obviously, when you see the amount of draft capita they've put into that, and it doesn't seem to be panning out. And even a guy like Ryan Ramczyk not even having a good day.
No, and I mean, part of this is scheme, right? Like we can talk about the play calling a little bit. Personally, I think people are focused on the wrong things. They're talking about, why didn't you throw late in the game? I actually think that was the right call, and we can go into that a little bit. But there was points in that game where I was just like, what are you doing? Like, 1st and 14, they're max protecting and running a shot play at a play action. Well, that's not going to work, guys. Like, they're not respecting the run game, and you end up with Landon Young isolated on Rashawn Gary, who already has 2 sacks. Landon Young is the jumbo tight end. And so, like, you need to slide protection. You need to do something. You need to move the launch point, get Jameis out of there, or work the quick game so you can at least get this drive started. That drive, you're at 2nd and 22. The drive's effectively over. And so, Like, to me, that was those types of calls were more problematic to me. But I mean, James Hurst, you know, James Hurst was already struggling, and when this happened, I immediately was like, this is going to go badly. Cesar Ruiz comes out with a concussion, and Andres Peak comes in, and now I have no idea why they have not been cross-training Andres Peak at right guard, right? Why not? Why have you not been doing that? But Andres Peak comes in at left guard, and that means that James Hurst, who has exclusively played on the left side in camp and talked to us about how switching from tackle to guard is a heck of a lot easier than switching across the line to the opposite side. Like, he openly was like, that's something that I struggle with. That's something that a lot of linemen will struggle with. So why wasn't Andres Peak, when he was not starting, cross-training so that if he came in, he could be the right guard, and you only had one guy playing out of position instead of a backup and another guy playing out of position? And you put Hurst over there on that right side, it was only a matter of time. I question Doug Marrone. I question Pete Carmichael. I question the scheme. It's not working. And, I think, I'm not going to play a lot of audio in this from the players and the coaches, because, it's all fucking, I'm sorry. It's all, I'll cut that out.
We can curse on the podcast.
Yeah, we can, but it's a bad habit to get into. It's only a matter of time before I'm dropping one on the game broadcast. And I think Dennis Allen, like, if you read between the lines here, like, this is for DA in a post game, this type of comment is not made lightly. And so here it is.
Yeah, I think it needs to be better. And for whatever reason, we got to figure that out. Particularly, early in the game. So I think that's something that we've got to improve and we've got to get better at. We knew that this was a team that could rush the passer.
Do you have any idea? Can you put your finger on, like, maybe why it isn't starting?
Well, look, there's a couple of them where we just got beat early, and so we'll have to keep looking at what are we doing technique-wise, what are we teaching, are we teaching the right things, but certainly that's an area that we've got to get better at that, because it's not been good enough.
And, like, you don't get a ton out of DA in these post-game press conferences, but I mean, to me, that's shots fired across your offensive line coach's bow there. Like,
sure, what are we teaching?
Yeah, like there's something's not clicking here, right? And now our quarterback is out with an injury for no other reason than he's been getting laid out. And you can say, sure, he needs to protect himself better, fine. But, like, I mean, we're talking immediate pressure. And he's got to hang in there because he's trying to get this offense moving. And he's just getting laid out. And, like, when I went through the film from week 2, I was amazed how many times he got hit. I didn't even realize it. Like, he got hit after throwing the ball, and he had to hang in there and just take a huge hit. And, like, sometimes you're like, wow, why did he miss this? Why didn't he get the ball where it was supposed to go? Because he's having to throw it early. He's having to get the ball out, because if he doesn't, it's a huge sack. And, like, that is happening so much. And, I don't know how you fix it. I don't know how you go about doing that. Hopefully, you're getting Alvin Kamara back, and hopefully that makes teams respect the run game a little bit more. And, you're going to get some easier matchups. I don't know if that's this week, right? The Bucs have a good front too. And a lot of teams have good fronts. You can't just say, well, okay, every time we play a good defensive line, we're going to get teed off on at the quarterback position. It's, we can talk about play calling all we want. We can talk about Pete Carmichael. We can talk about offensive production. There's no right play call when you are in a jumbo package with 6 offensive linemen and you get beat by a 4-man rush clean. No chance for the quarterback. There's no right play call for that.
I thought this game was going to be a get-right game for the run game, because we saw the Falcons, the Bears have success against this Packers defense, which we all, I think, mocked going into this game for having so many first-rounders and, underperforming so much. Man, oh, man, they tore that Saints O-line apart.
Yeah. Well, especially in the second half. Like, the people are saying the offense was terrible throughout the game. I mean, I think, like, there are points where the offensive line torpedoes the entire drive. But, they had a long drive for a touchdown, went to Jimmy Graham. He finally did something great,
Not ornamental.
one of my honorable mentions because I said, hey, if you're going to be a red zone threat, we need you to be a red zone threat. And he came through in their, they had 2 red zone opportunities. He came through in one of them. Fine. If you're a guy that's out there and you're catching touchdowns for a team that struggles in the red zone, fine. I understand it. Okay.
Right.
He earned himself a reprieve from me. But and then they had a long drive late in the half that got bogged down and they kicked a field goal. There's only so many possessions. There's only so many drives. You can only have so many extended possessions. And they scored on 2 of them. The special teams helped them out and they were up 17-0. And this is a team we have seen play better in the second half of games. Week 1, week 2, the offense looked much more effective once they were able to kind of adjust and get through it. Well, you never really had that chance in this game. And so I think that if Derek Carr stays in this game, you win it by 3 scores. And now you're just trying to figure out how you can win it without him if he's out. And we're going to get more into that injury in the second segment. But I can't say strongly enough, something's got to give here. I don't know if Cesar Ruiz is going to miss time. I don't know what adjustments you make. Do you give Nick Saldiveri a chance? Do you put Andres Pete back in the starting lineup and figure something else out on the opposite side? I don't know, but if it's gotten to a point where this season could get they got bailed out by this injury. By the way, this could have been a lot worse with Derek Carr, and it's gotten to a point where, and I know I'm bogarting this entire segment, but the offensive line, not the play calling, not the talent, is going to torpedo this season if they can't get it together.
Well, like you said, though, how is it going to get better with the O-line? There's nobody walking through the door. How much more coaching do these guys need after going through training camp? If you make a switch now at offensive line coach, what is that going to do for the remainder of the season kind of thing? It's just an issue we knew too going into the year. I think a lot of people had as a concern with this offensive line. And sadly, we're seeing now some of the ramifications, and in no way did I foresee them putting the quarterback in so much danger, like you put it too. It's it really is a danger zone out there for the QB right now. I can't imagine anyone feels really safe.
No, I mean, yeah, it was only a matter of time. How many times can your quarterback get hit before something breaks? Right. And when he went down, I thought, man, broken collarbone, season over. Right. That's what it looked like because he stayed down for a while.
Yeah.
And then, and people made a big deal about going to a local hospital. I'm pretty sure it's just Lambeau is old and they don't have x-rays because that's all you need for an AC sprain, which is what the injury is. All you need is an x-ray. I'm guessing they just don't have an x-ray on site.
Definitely not for the visitors. I don't know.
Exactly. At least not for the visiting team. And so that would be my guess is it's just there's a local hospital and it's easier to do that. But yeah, I mean, they got bailed out. So we're going to have to see. But, you say no one's walking through the door. Maybe someone should be. There's guys on the free agent market that can probably be outplaying what's happening right now. And, the funny thing is I'm not, the tackles or whatever, the interior line, Eric McCoy, right? This is a guy who is a stud center and has not played like it. Cesar Ruiz, he's been hit or miss. The injury obviously stinks. He's got the concussion. I don't know how long it's going to keep him out. He did not look pleased going back to the locker room. And James Hurst, I don't know. Because that's where, you can live with pressure on the edges. You can live with, just riding a guy out wide, and because it allows the quarterback to step up. But what happens when there's nowhere to step up, right? Then you get eaten alive. What happens when there's a free rusher from the interior and you have to have your quarterback bail? Well, Derek Carr is not Lamar Jackson. He's not outrunning that guy, and he's going to try to hang in the pocket and make a throw. And that's what has got him hurt. So anyway, this has been long
too with talking about Ramczyk. And like you said, with McCoy too, those are your 2 quote unquote studs, at least for me on that O-line. And they just haven't looked like it. And to me, like I said, Ramczyk was a huge surprise this game. I haven't gone through film study or anything, but there were just too many times during the game watching it where I was like, man, I couldn't believe I'm seeing him getting abused by that Packers front.
Everyone has, blame. That's the thing. People want to put it all at Carmichael's feet. People want to put it all at Marone's feet. People want to put it all at Dennis Allen's feet. Everybody gets some of it. Like, there's no one
Trevor Penning's an
on
easy
that.
one too. They want to blame.
Who?
They want to blame Trevor Penning too, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, Grant, all things considered, he's the
Right.
I mean, obviously he's not having a great, he's not dominating or anything, but I think there are bigger issues than him. And you could say, well, part of the issue is they have to give him help, which means that help isn't always available for the strength of the rush. And that could be fair. Maybe that's part of the difficulties in scheming, but hopefully, like Alvin Kamara is going to fix a lot of things, in terms of, what you haven't been able to do so far.
But he's not blocking.
Yeah, but I mean, what they need to do is slow down the rush first off, and that's what they weren't able to do in this game. They weren't really able to do it against the Panthers either, but they were able to hit big, and the Panthers offense just didn't have anything. Jordan Love got the job done. I think the defense, and we'll get into actually, let's go forward. So my second stock down, defensive line, and I don't think they had a terrible game, but they did not affect it as much as you needed them to, particularly late in the game. And I think part of it is the defense was on the field the entire second half. Like you expect them to hold up. You expect them to hold up. You expect them to hold up. At a certain point, that becomes a problem because of the way you play defense, right? Like, you don't constantly rotate pass rushers. Cam Jordan's on the field basically the whole game. Carl Granderson's on the field basically the whole game. You get some Isaiah Foskey, some Tano Passanio, but pretty much they're there. That's their job. And then on the outsides, like, the Saints play a lot of man-to-man, and what man-to-man requires is for these guys to chase down people all day long, and in most cases, people that are much faster than them. And so why does the defense wane late in games when you are on the field for too long? That's why. I mean, like, you're asking Marshawn Lattimore to chase people around in man-to-man coverage all day. You're asking Isaac Yiadom to do that. You're asking Alontae Taylor, a guy who had a great game, to do that. And, mistakes happen. And so I'm not completely out on the defensive line, but I don't think they played Jordan Love particularly well in the second half of this game. And that one run down the sideline where they just forgot to knock him out of bounds, part of that's because the NFL rules make it so if you hit him and he's going out of bounds, that's a 15-yard penalty. You got to get a hand on him and at least shove him. And I think Carl Granderson got his contract. It was well-deserved, but this was not a banner day for the defensive line.
The problem going into it is, like, man, you thought the D-line was going to eat with the offensive line issues that the Packers had. Bakhtiari and the other, what was it? The guard was out as well for them. And so, yeah, I thought they were going to be able to take advantage, pressure Love, even though everyone's talking about, his big home opener in Lambeau. And I was like, sorry, they're going to spoil that and completely rattle him. And that definitely was not the case.
I mean, they did get pressure. They just didn't get home.
No,
right? Like like Jordan Love was running for his life a lot of that game.
Escape, and good escapability.
Yeah, he's fast. They had a hard time hemming him in, and they did a much better job against Bryce Young. He escaped, but when he escaped, it was up the middle. And like, Jordan Love is a guy who wants to still pass the ball when he gets outside the pocket, and that's where the Saints struggled. Cam Jordan mentioned that they started, doing a lot of dinking and dunking and then throwing up prayers. And sometimes those prayers get answered with those penalties. That drive where they had back-to-back pass interference penalties. They were penalties. The Alontae Taylor, if you want to fault him for anything, he did not get his head around in a lot of balls. He was in good position, and he just, and a lot of those instances, he probably could have thrown a flag because there was contact, but he played well. Yeah, and that it's tough because the defense shut him out for 52 minutes of that game. So how mad can you be about the defense? And it's like, well, what happened late in the game? Well, how long can a defense shut out a team? If you have one field goal in that second half, you win. One.
And I'm sure that, but besides being physically drained too, I mean, there's that emotional part of it too after losing your starting quarterback, obviously. And I'm not making excuses either, but I'm not down on the defense either. I think, like you said, they just unfortunately were on the field way too long, and man, things fell apart there late in the fourth quarter. and you still had a chance, but unfortunately the field goal wasn't true.
Yeah, and when the moment I knew it's like, okay, if the Saints do not score one more time in this game, they're gonna lose it, was the 2-point conversion. Because that was demoralizing.
Yeah.
And it was like, if the Packers get the ball back, they're scoring another touchdown. No question in my mind. And like Deuce was talking about this on a broadcast, it is kind of a strange decision, but if you watch the NFL, that's happening a lot more often. When teams are down 14, they will a lot of times go for that initial 2-point conversion because the math dictates that 2-point conversion attempts are about a 50-50 scenario. You will convert about 50% of the time. And so, I don't think that the math necessarily adds up the way people pretend it does. But the idea is, okay, you flip a coin twice, you're probably going to get heads one time. So, and you only have to get it once. So if you get it that first time, that's the ideal scenario. And you can win it the way the Packers did. Yeah, the Giants tried it against the 49ers and they didn't get it, but that means you're down 8. And so you get another chance. And now if you lose a game that way because you don't get either, then people start to question it. But because of the odds, you feel like that is an advantage. And you saw like the pressure that put on the Saints when they converted that 2-point conversion and had to defend it after a long drive. That, from a morale perspective, I feel like that was what snapped it. And you could just tell, one of the reasons I was okay with the Saints throwing it on that last drive is because the way the Packers played it, they let the clock run after first down. So if the Saints just ran it 3 times, they guaranteed that they had a timeout in their pocket, and they would have had about a minute, even if Blake Griffey makes that. And so what throwing did was mean they had 2 instead of 1. But I think the way the Packers played that, the last 8 minutes of that from a coaching perspective, ran circles around the Saints' decision-making in how they tried to close out that game. And that kind of leads me into my next thing. And I feel bad about it, but last stock down player, Mr. Groupie, Blake, it's not really fair. He was put in a really tough position. But this was what I said. Well, like all offseason, I was like, I get it. These guys are really close. Blake Groupie might be slightly more consistent. But what happens when you get into a situation where you need that kick to win a game? And I know Will Lutz is nails in that scenario. Like he might miss a few kicks, right? But when you need him in that big moment from 60, I have faith. And when you need it from 61, I still have faith, even though, the Lord said no. And that's what you saw. I mean, like, I think Blake Griffey's going to be an excellent kicker, but you got to live with the growth right now. And I think you just saw the pressure get to him a little bit there. I really do. And, it cost you a game. I'm
not saying a 46 yards a chip shot, but you got to make those.
In today's NFL, it's a chip shot. In today's NFL, a 55-yarder, 55 yards is today's 45. Or so, like, what would have been a 45-yarder 10 years ago was a 55-yarder now. You should never turn down a 55-yard field goal attempt if you trust your kicker, particularly if you have the wind at your back, which is what the Saints did with they were at the 37-yard line and they decided to punt.
Right.
And what bothers me the most about it is it's almost the exact same decision you made in week 13 of last season when you had like 4th and 1 at the 44 or something like that, and you decided to punt. In that game, you were up 16-3, and you lost 17-16. In this game, you were up 17-0 and lost 18-17. I need this team. If you're going to be aggressive play calling, if you're going to be aggressive and throw it on 2nd down, trying to ice a game, if you're going to be aggressive and throw it on 3rd and 6, trying to ice a game, right? Then I need you to maintain that throughout the game. Like there's this weird disconnect between the play calling, which is hyper aggressive, and the in-game decision making, which is hyper conservative. And it does not marry together. Either you're going for it or you're not. And in this case, it's like, show some confidence in your goddamn kicker, right? Like what is he, how does he feel? Like when he has to go up there and make that kick to go win a game after you didn't give him a chance earlier in the game. I don't know. I do not like how they went about that. That it felt like they were clinging on for dear life, trying not to lose. And
I agree with that statement for sure.
And that's how you lose games. And so like I'm not down on Blake Grupe, but there was this idea that he couldn't miss. Like that you kind of felt like it's like, okay, man, this kid is nails, this kid is clutch, and I think he will be. But that was a letdown for sure.
Like you mentioned, it was definitely that scenario we were all waiting for, game on the line, outside, the wind gusting, I guess, enough, right, to be an issue?
It was going end to end, right? So it was, I think he blocked it a little bit, and it just like the wind coming at it was enough to just kind of hold it out to the right. And yeah, I mean, that's all it takes. And he's, again, like we talked about this before he came on, I don't know if he's ever had to kick in the wind, at least not at the pro level. Like you were out there for training camp. There was not a single storm. We did not have like a single thunderstorm where you had a windy day. He was kicking outside, but it was basically perfect conditions to kick. And then, okay, he's kicking inside, right? Like, I don't know how much he's actually had to work with wind. And he was kicking on grass. I don't think that was an issue, but it's something that you got to get used to. And unfortunately for the Saints, that learning experience cost them a game. And so, you gotta keep going. And I think the way he handled it afterward, he talked to the media, he was great. I really like Blake. Just disappointing.
Yeah, I mean the whole game, obviously a huge disappointment when you're leading through going into the fourth quarter on the road, and then I don't know everything. It's in none of those games that you go away from going, how did they lose this really?
Well, I mean, I know how they lost it. When you lose your quarterback, things break. And
in a game where you have a special teams touchdown and no turnover, they didn't turn the ball over, but you still found a way. That's not impressive, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, trust me. If it wasn't for the week 13 loss last year, it would have been like, man, this is the worst loss I can remember in quite some time. Unfortunately, we know how this feels, and that's why the decision to kick bothers me so much. Or the decision to punt bothers me so much, just because like I'd like to think you learn from your mistakes, but it was the exact same type of decision. And I've talked before, I would love to see this team be more analytically inclined, because I'm pretty sure the analytics say go there. You know what team I can guarantee you will never be going for 2 when they score that touchdown down 14? The Saints. Because it's just not how they operate. They don't work that way. And it's like, if you're going to be aggressive, go for it. But it only seems to be the play calling that's aggressive, not the decision making.
When you do the down, 3 up, 3 down, does it include coaches or no?
I tend not to, because I kind of work that in. I kind of use the proxy, like offensive line. That includes Doug Marrone.
I was going to say I'm throwing in Pete too this game, Carmichael.
Yeah, we can go through it. I don't think he had a particularly good second half. But again, it's like when whatever plans they had, they went out the window when Derek Carr went down, and they didn't adjust well, and so that's on him. But
I'm flabbergasted too when you look at the stats and you see 0 catches next to Rashid Shaheed's name.
Yeah, he was targeted twice. Carr missed him downfield. He was open. He got it to him late.
Yeah.
So before we end the segment, so one thing, just to mention, like one of the things that annoys me, it's like, okay, you can criticize the play calling, but I feel like people go for the low hanging fruit and they don't always get it. Like, so throwing on second down, right? To me, the decision changed when the Packers decided to let that clock run. They ran Taysom Hill. He got about a yard. He basically got stuffed. He had to fight for a yard. And the clock went from 1:40 to 1 minute. The Saints ran it way down. From there, it changes your equation, right? Because now if you run twice, all that does is mean they use 2 timeouts, but they still have one. And you're kicking it with about a minute left, meaning they will have a minute to come back. And not being able to use all 3 of those timeouts. Like if they could have burned all 3 of their timeouts and give it back with 1:40, that's what I think you do. But because they're getting a timeout back either way, I think being aggressive is the right call, because they gave you that 40 seconds, which means if you go for it and get a first down, you're not going to be able to kick with about 20 seconds left, right? And the downside is you go for it and you're incomplete, which is what happened. Then they have 2 timeouts instead of 1. Really, you're in the same boat. And like people are like, well, why didn't you just run it and get a couple more yards? Well, I mean, they're going to stack the box. You don't have Derrick Henry. You have Tony Jones. Like, you have just as much likelihood of losing yardage and making that a longer kick as you do gaining any real yardage. Like you're settling for kicking from where you are if you run the ball 2 more times. Like, this is not like, you saw that offensive line out there. They can't pass protect, but they weren't that much better in run blocking either. Like, the idea that they're going to fire off the ball and when the team is loading up the box, be able to generate push. No. So like, I think, there's a lot of stuff to criticize. Like we talked about the protection and the play action, the long developing play on first down when you just want to get a drive starter. Like that's all fair game, I think. And you can just quibble with the play call maybe. But I think the decision to throw on second down was the right one. And you completed third down. Like, you completed the third down pass. So you did make them burn 1 timeout. But yeah, I think that, it's the same type of decision you made in week 1 when you had 3rd and 6 and you decided not to run it and you went deep to Rashid, and that's how you won that game. If that is completed and you get a first down and suddenly that's a 35-yard kick and you're kicking it with 20 seconds left, then everyone's like, wow, what a great call. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. But I think you're right. I don't think Pete had a very good game. I just think that's not like, that's where everyone's eyes are drawn, because it was the penultimate kind of play.
Right.
And that's like where your focus is. But that's not an example of bad play calling, in my opinion.
No, I hear you on that. There's just a lot of, I guess some of the issues too have to be what he's trying to work around with this offensive line too. I don't know, but it still feels like the offense is stuck in the mud from a year ago. And I didn't expect that.
The Saints have the Saints defense has held 11 straight opponents to 20 points or less. Saints are 6-5 in those games.
Unacceptable. Right.
Yeah. But all right, this has been a long segment, so let's wrap it up. We're going to come back. We're going to dive into Derek Carr's injury. We're going to hear from Dr. David Elias, who's an orthopedic surgeon with Ortho LA. He talked to Tommy Tucker this morning on WWL. He's going to get us some insight into the Derek Carr injury. So keep it locked on Inside Black and Gold. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. And this segment, we're going to take a break from the 3 up, 3 down, because, man, that's depressing. And we're going to talk about something even more depressing. Shoulder injury. Especially when you're throwing shoulder. Gosh, darn it. Anyway, I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. So, yes, Derek Carr went down. Initially, I was like, man, that's a broken collarbone, clavicle, whatever, something that's going to end his season. And you're thinking like, man, how many games can they win with Jameis Winston? Right? Can they get through? And you kept him around for a reason. I think that's a tough spot to be in coming in at halftime. The offense isn't really geared toward what you want to do well. He went to Mike Thomas a lot more. I think that's going to be what you see from Jameis a lot, is him utilizing Mike Thomas a lot. The deep shots to Rashid, I don't know. But Derek Carr left the stadium, got an X-ray, AC joint sprain. We don't know the grade, and we're getting to more of that in a bit. But yeah, what was kind of your reaction when you saw that? I know you were texting me.
Yeah, my first one was just, which shoulder was it? Because I couldn't tell right away. And then after the replay, you could tell, bam, he landed on that throwing shoulder, and all kinds of expletives come out your mouth when you see that. Because, yeah, you definitely feel the worst. And we went through hell last year. I mean, I know, because we've talked about it, how miserable life was, dealing with, the Andy Dalton-led Saints in this muddling offense. But, I mean, to start out, at least, the offense hasn't looked that much better, honestly. But to see the starting quarterback go down like that, you feared the worst. And thankfully, it looks like we've avoided anything major, though. So, still, I guess, have some questions and concerns going into it without knowing more. But at least I'm sure with Dr. Elias explaining things, you realize that it's not a death sentence for this season for David Carr, at least.
Derek,
Derek Carr.
You said last year. I mean, I was talking to Nick Underhill after the game, and I was like, when's the last season the Saints got through without having to start their backup quarterback for like 4 or 5 games? And I think we landed on 2018. Because 2019, Brees got the thumb injury. That was Teddy Bridgewater. 2020, Brees had the rib injury. That was, Taysom and Jameis with the second half against the 49ers. 2021 was Jameis when he went down and you had to start Trevor Siemian and then Taysom Hill. You lost 5 games in a row, torpedoed your season. Last year, Jameis for 3 games and then Andy Dalton the rest of the way. So, I mean, every season it seems like. And at a certain point, it's not just bad luck. It's like you're letting this guy down. But, like you said, it's not the end of the world, the AC joint sprain. And so, that's, colloquially, if you're trying to figure out what that is, it's, we would call it a separated shoulder, right? Like that's kind of the term that people say, and that's really what you're looking at. But here is David Elias with Tommy Tucker this morning on WWL. It was a really informative interview. So let's take a listen.
So Derek Carr goes down hurt. We're hearing that it might be an AC. What is that? Not an ACL, but an AC. David Elias joins us now, an orthopedic surgeon with Ortho LA, to help us. I know you've not seen Derek Carr. You don't know what his condition is, but generally speaking, what is AC? What is a shoulder separation, shoulder sprain? Talk us through all of that if you can, please.
Yeah, an AC sprain, it's a pretty common injury we see in football, usually caused from a direct impact. Either you fall on the shoulder, you get hit at the shoulder, or you can fall on an outstretched hand. It's a sprain or a tear of the ligament that connects the acromion to the clavicle, which is the collarbone. We call it a separation, not a dislocation. And with any injuries, they're graded based on how many of the ligaments are torn and the severity of the injury. So, grade 1 is a mild sprain, grade 2 a moderate sprain. You get into your grade 3, 4, 5, 6 sprains, and those are the more severe. And sometimes, usually you're talking about surgery, reconstruction, grade 4 and higher. Sometimes a grade 3 can be surgical. With Derek Carr, it's his throwing shoulder, so that complicates it a little bit more as far as return to play, depending on the grade.
So a separation is a sprain, or a sprain is a separation?
Yes, a separation is, they call it an AC separation or an AC sprain. Anytime you're spraining a ligament, you're tearing fibers of the ligament. And again, most sprains that you hear about, whether it be the knee, an MCL sprain, or the shoulder, like an AC sprain, we grade the injury, based on the severity of the separation or the damage to the ligaments or the separation of the joint.
The treatment for this I guess it depends on the grade, huh?
It does. They'll probably get, you diagnose it by an X-ray. That tells you're looking at the X-ray to see basically how high is the collarbone separated from the acromion. And that's usually what you use to grade it. Now, they'll get an MRI because less than, I'd say 20% of the time, you can get an associated injury, another injury, like a tear to the rotator cuff or labrum, which makes it more significant. But typically, a grade 1 and grade 2 is never surgical. Grade 3s depend on the separation and depend on the patient. And again, with him being his dominant throwing arm, that could change whether you treat something conservative or surgical. But as a surgeon, when we see an AC sprain, we prefer to treat these conservative because they do a lot better and they get back a lot quicker because, typically they're milder sprains.
Wait, say that again, Doc. You prefer what?
You prefer to treat it non-operatively.
Gotcha.
So, because the outcome is quicker, it's faster, the return to play is faster. When you have to reconstruct an AC joint, that's about a year recovery to come back. So what we don't want to hear is that this is a grade 4 sprain that requires surgery. They know the grade right now, and of course I know nothing about it, but
right.
they've taken an X-ray. Typically, you can tell the grade of the separation by an X-ray. The MRI will be ordered looking for other injuries that may have occurred. which happen less than probably 20% of the time. So
you're talking about
hopefully
labrum
nothing else happened.
Labrum or things like that.
Rotator
Labrum.
cuff. Yeah. Correct.
So what kind of like non-surgical treatment would somebody with an AC sprain of a lower grade non-surgical be looking at?
So if it's a grade 1 sprain, which are probably the more common, the grade 1 or 2 sprains, we just put them in a sling, let things calm down, and then get them into therapy pretty quick, get them moving pretty quick, and back to doing their sporting activity. Typically, if it's a grade 1 sprain, parents or coaches want to know how long is my player out, and I typically, if I'm just looking at averages, I tell patients grade 1 sprain, 2 weeks out, grade 2 sprains, maybe 4 weeks out, and a grade 3 sprain that we treat non-surgically, probably 6 weeks out. Now with him, what makes it a little bit harder is his position requires him to throw. So a baseball pitcher or an overhead athlete or, a quarterback, it may be a little bit longer than what I just said, just because of the nature of what they do.
And on the other side of it, he is a professional athlete in excellent shape. I guess that helps a little bit or not, or does it mean that the more the muscles are defined, the worse they can get hurt or something? I'm not an orthopedist doctor. I'm sorry.
It'll make the recovery quicker being in shape for him and easier, but I mean, it won't change how they treat or how careful they are with him. They'll make sure that he is throwing relatively pain-free and has all his strength back before they attempt to let him go back.
When it's gone, is it gone, or is this something that could haunt somebody for the rest of the season?
No, it shouldn't haunt him, but if you have a lower grade sprain, you can almost feel a little bump on your shoulder from the collarbone is basically raised up. And so if someone returns to play in the same season, they'll pad it just so he doesn't take another hit to it. But, I guess unless he has another injury, he's not risk. That would be the only risk of taking a grade 1 injury to a grade 4 injury if he sustains another direct impact. So typically when people return to play, they're ready, and we don't typically see them have a problem or come back with a worse injury that from the prior one.
So an AC they knew immediately. I know they took him to the hospital. I don't know if Green Bay has x-ray facilities or not. I thought they had him at every NFL facility. MRI would determine the other thing, whether it's a torn rotator cuff as well as a labrum. And, Doctor, I know you don't know anything about Derek Carr's case, but if it's the most minor, from your experience, for somebody that would have the most minor separation and playing quarterback, the quickest they could get back on the field would be?
If it truly is a low-grade AC sprain, I would say 2 to 4 weeks.
All right. So again, thanks to Dr. Elias for that. He's an orthopedic surgeon with Ortho LA. There's a few things that he said there that I find notable. So first things first, MRI, Derek Carr is going to have one, I'm sure. Like he said, you need to rule out any associated injuries that you might not have been able to see on an X-ray. So I'm sure if he hasn't had one yet, he's going to have an MRI to rule out like a rotator cuff tear or something like as the shoulder was separated, hurt something else. That's something you can't really see on the X-ray. So, I think he said less than 20% of these injuries have those. So hopefully that's something they can avoid, because that would obviously complicate things further. The other thing is we don't know the grade of the injury yet. And that's going to be the biggest factor of, how much of ligament damage is there? How far was the shoulder separated? Because that's going to determine how long it takes them to come back.
The Saints know right now, though.
Yeah, that was one thing that he made clear. It was like, it doesn't take long. Like doctors, you can tell almost immediately, like in terms of like once you evaluate it, what the grade is. So I'm sure the Saints are well aware of how severe it is. It just hasn't been reported yet. And so but I think 2 weeks is the minimum you're probably looking at with this type of injury, even the most minor version of it. And 2 weeks can mean, okay, maybe he can get back, next week, right? Like, it doesn't mean he's going to miss 2 weeks of football. It means that you're probably looking at that as your target of at minimum, so maybe he could get back for that game against the Patriots. More likely, I'd guess you're talking week 7 against the Texans, assuming it's a grade 1 sprain, which based on, what I'm hearing, kind of the tone of everything and the demeanor of everybody, it sounds like that's probably what you're looking at. I mean, don't quote me on that, but he was back with the team. He came home with the team, so it wasn't like he needed to get immediate treatment out in Green Bay, and so you're going to be probably looking at Jameis this week, but all in all, I think you got lucky, and hopefully, I think they can win games with Jameis. I really do. I wouldn't want to see him the rest of the way. No offense. But I think this team is better with Derek Carr at quarterback. I think they can win with Jameis, but I think they're better with Derek Carr. So hopefully by the time you do get him back, you've solved some of these issues. And the question is, how long does it take him to rehab? How long does it take to get the strength back in that shoulder? They're probably going to pad it, like Dr. Elias said. But it's like, yeah, he can recover, but then if you let him get teed off on again, you're right back where you started.
Yeah, and we talked about in the first segment too about being afraid for anyone who's back there. And Jameis isn't Mr. Mobile quarterback. He can run, but it's not like he's ever looking to take off. And yeah, that's a great point. What you had earlier, it's like, do you start Taysom at quarterback maybe because of the offensive line issues, and that QB power is going to be more success? I just don't know the team's vision right now with that O-line.
Well, so here's one thing that's worth talking about too. You know what becomes really inconvenient right now? The fact that Jake Haener is suspended for 3 more games. Like when it happened, you were like, well, it's not the end of the world. You have Derek, you have Jameis. You don't really need him. He'd be inactive anyway, or that emergency quarterback. Now, your only option is Taysom. And so if you don't start Taysom, which I think you're going to start Jameis, if you don't start Taysom, he's got to be the backup. And so not only do you have to put him in that role, you lose him, like you might still use him, but you can't use him as much as you want to. That's just unrealistic. So what do you do? there are a couple options, and I would not be surprised if the Saints went and said, hey, Jake, you want to come hang out? Jake Luton? He's on the Panthers practice squad. They could sign him. They could go get him. We know how that works. They could go poach him. They'd have to put him on the active roster, but you have space because you got all these suspensions. Or there's another guy out there, free agent, friend of the program, Mr. Ian Book, baby. He's a free agent. Saints cut him. I'm sorry, the Eagles cut him. The Saints technically cut him too.
I've had enough of close the book, please, on that experience.
I get it, but at the same
time, it's a body.
Well, it's a body, but it's also both these guys know the offense, and that's the thing. If you're going to sign someone off the street, they're not going to be up on the offense in a week, whereas these guys could be. And
Trevor Simeon's out there.
That's true. That's another option. No, seriously, because all I need is someone to be the backup so that I can still use Taysom. Right? I just need someone so that I don't end up in a situation where I just have 0 quarterbacks. Right?
Yeah.
And I guess the alternative is like, okay, just you use Taysom a lot, you kind of 50-50 it and you go there, but I think that's a tough spot to be in. Either way, it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that roster spot this week.
Kamara's back. He's the emergency quarterback.
It's true. That's what it was before. You had all these guys, so yeah, it's true.
No, we got all kinds of weird scenarios already in this season.
No doubt. But all right, let's wrap that segment up. We're going to come back. We're going to go through the 3 up because there are a couple positive players. I do want to highlight them. And this team,
I like it.
They're not giving up on the season yet. 2-1, not exactly a death sentence. So I think we should try to look at some of the positives too and see where they go from here. But all right, this is Inside Black and Gold. We will be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. Losing sucks.
It does.
The way they lost was worse. But is it worse than losing by 50.
Yeah, in that scenario, yeah, because they haven't won a game at all this year. So the Denver's 0-3, Saints 2-1, and still have hope. It already looks like they're ready to have the funeral for Sean Payton out in Denver.
I had some people tell me they would rather have lost the way Denver lost. And I'm like, what? I mean, I can understand, like I think Tyrann Matthew said this. It was like, I would rather get blown out than lose the way they did, because it's way more just demoralizing and disappointing to know you should have won the game and you blew it. Whereas when you're getting blown out, you never had a chance. But I don't think that's true when you're allowing 70 points, and the Dolphins decided not to kick a field goal that would have set the all-time record. They took pity on you and didn't put you in the record book as the most points allowed in NFL history. That's almost like when you leave someone a tip that's like $1 and they come up to you, like, you clearly need this more than I do. I mean, I'm not man, 70 points? What? How? So if there's a
Sean Payton can't win without Drew.
I mean, Drew wouldn't have been any help in that game. 70 points? If all you did was start Dolphins in fantasy football, you would have won.
Lord, right?
You could have left half your roster empty. If you started Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert, and Tua Tagovailoa, you won. I think they were the top 3 fantasy scorers this week.
I was going to say, imagine like on your team if you had Tua and like the Tyreek Hill combination.
Yeah. Anyway. Oh, I forgot about Tyreek Hill. Yeah. Yeah. Good for him
too.
Devon Achane, I think, is how they're supposed to say his name now. Anyway.
Right.
So yeah, stock up on not being the Broncos. That's good. And stock up on that second round pick, because it's sure looking like it might be the number 33 pick. Okay. So Saints players, as you look at it and you're like, okay, what positives can we draw out of this game? You do have to kind of try, right? You have to figure out what worked and build upon that. Like, that is a factor. That is what you have to do as an NFL team. You don't want to dwell on what went wrong. You have to fix the problems, but also figure out what you are doing well and continue to do those things. And in this case, I don't think there's anything you can do wrong as long as you are throwing in Chris Olave's direction, because he is the truth. That one-handed catch he had,
beautiful,
was so casual. It was like, I was watching it because it was on the opposite sideline, and I was like, it almost looked like he gave up on the play. It was so casual that I was like, oh, he must be out of bounds, because no way did he stay in bounds and still catch it that casually with no effort. But no, it was there. It was perfect. It's gorgeous. It was beautiful. It was like, put that to music. That's up there. It's not the Odell Beckham catch, but it's like that type of just smooth. Like he is something. And it's so much fun to watch. It was his catch that set up the field goal, right? Like, the end of the game, the Packers gave the ball back, and I don't think anyone in that stadium even considered they were going to allow a first down. I think that stadium was like, oh, we're going to win this easily. They're not even going to get out of their shoes. And all of a sudden, Chris Olave catch down the sideline. Saints are in business, right? And like, he's that type of player.
Thankfully, he makes us look a little bit smart, because he was one of the folks, obviously, coming from everyone out of training camp, obviously how impressive Olave looked. And yeah, has not disappointed at all year 2 in the NFL. And I think pretty soon you're going to start hearing his name obviously mentioned with those other top elite names in that group, which is we got some amazing receivers obviously in the NFL, but Olave, he is that dude.
You can't single him. Can't single cover him. And it's going to make life a lot easier on Mike Thomas once this offense gets its head out of its ass.
I heard the Raiders broadcast last night kind of said something you said last year about Olave. It's like Devontae Adams. He's just always open. And I'm like, that's like Olave.
Yeah. He's always open. 104 yards on 8 catches. He's up to 302 yards on 22 catches through 3 games. That's a pace for 124 catches, 1,710 yards, 0 touchdowns. Hopefully that changes. That's the only thing.
The only negative in the end zone part.
Yeah, the only negative I can say for Olave is he hasn't gotten the end zone, but I mean, he did get in the end zone. It got overturned because he had a toe on the line. So, like, if you want to go that way, maybe he catches 3 or 4. That's the only thing I'll say is in the red zone, I would love it if he was a little bit more assertive and you went to him a little bit more. But, I mean, the big issue for this team is, I mean, this team can win kicking field goals, right? Like, if all they did in the second half was kick a field goal, they win. So I'm the red zone stuff we can talk about, and you do want to punch it in, but I also need them to be able to move the ball and get into scoring range, because that's yes, you want to score touchdowns, but also you got to put points on the board, because if you're standing still, you're going to get caught up too quickly. So like in that sense, I think Olave has been very important and will continue to be important. So he's one.
Yeah,
of my
definitely big
stock-up
arrow
players
up.
for sure. I mean, yeah, it's like straight up. Like it's the needle's broken off. All right. The next guy, and this guy who I thought he actually had a rough start. And one of the best things that I think that can happen for Alontae Taylor is he makes a mistake early in the game. Not a huge one, not a big one, but he makes a mistake that just like locks him in. Because I think that's what happened. He had a chance to get Jordan Love down in the backfield. He kind of whiffed. He overran it. And it felt like he locked in at that point. And he had another chance like a couple plays later and he wiped him out. He had 5 passes defensed, 5 tackles. He was everywhere. He was in the he was on the field for basically, I think he was 100% of the snaps. When they were in the nickel, he was in the slot. When they were in base, he was outside. I mean, they were going after him because no one wants to throw at Marshawn. So it was Isaac Yiadom and Alontae getting targeted constantly. I thought, Alontae, he did have that obviously pass interference. He didn't get his head around for the ball as much as I'd like him to. But I mean, that kid is very good, and he's just gonna keep getting better.
Unbelievable. We get his first sack before his first interception.
Yeah. And like that was one of the reasons that the defensive line, like you look at the stats and it's like, oh, they had a sack, they had a couple sacks, they had a couple quarterback hits. But it was like Demario Davis, Alontae Taylor. Like it wasn't the defensive line making those plays.
Right.
Brian Brzee did have a nice play where he got upfield and he knocked the ball down. But Isaac Yiadom. I actually thought Isaac Yiadom had a good game. Consider all things considered, like he was getting targeted relentlessly.
Picked on for sure, right?
And I think he got beat for 1 touchdown late in the game. But I mean that was after play after play after play. He had a pass breakup that ended one of their drives. In the red zone. So, like the decision to play him, I think it was questioned a little bit. He wasn't the reason you lost. So, I think he's kind of the on the fringe. I think you have a really good depth cornerback group. Considering Paulson Debo went out and those guys held up. So that's one of my stock ups is I think the Alontae Taylor depth cornerback type situation. I think you're in good shape.
Yeah, and to your point there, too, I thought the fact of no Paulson Adebo, obviously no Marcus May either back there, the secondary still held up pretty well.
Yeah, and so we talked about Jimmy Graham earlier. He's one of my honorable mentions because, like I said, you brought him in to be a red zone threat. He caught a touchdown in the red zone. I mean, that's what, like, you knew he wasn't going to get a huge role. So if he's out there affecting the game, and heck, he scored 17 points. 7 of those were his, or 6 of those were his. So yeah, like I think that kind of gives you at least a little bit of an idea of like, okay, he can do some things. Like he's at least a factor. So give him that. But my last stock up player, it's Kendre Miller. Kendre Miller. I don't think he had a huge game, but he did lead the Saints in rushing. I think he had 39 yards on 9 carries. He showed some burst. I don't think he made any huge mistakes, right? Like I have to go back to the film and to look at the pass protection, but I don't think he was the culprit on any major misses. That could be wrong. Obviously, it's really tough to tell in real time. But I thought he handled himself well. He was on the field a good bit. He didn't fumble. There were no turnovers. He didn't get hurt. I think you're going to get Alvin back this week, and you're going to have to start making decisions on, okay, who's his backup? Because Jamal Williams is on injured reserve now. You're not going to get him back for at least 3 more weeks. The earliest he can get back would be week 7. So it would be 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. So he could get back week 7 if he's back healthy from that hamstring. But over the next few weeks, you're going to have to make a decision. Okay, is it Tony or is it Kendre? getting those RB2 reps. And from what I saw today, or yesterday rather, I think that Kendre did enough for me to feel confident in him getting at least the bulk of the backup carries. I think you're still going to work in Tony. I think he's going to be your pass pro option if you're sending someone in there on third down specifically for pass protection. But with a lot of things that went wrong today and an offense that got away from the run, even though it was working, I think Kendre, he showed himself pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard just because I want more, you want more, but I just don't see the holes opening up with this offensive line right now. And it's easy to keep piling on with the O-line, but man, this running back, the run game in general hasn't been great. It got a little better this past week, but once again, going into it, you knew the Pack were weak against the run and you wanted to see something. So at least it had some life, the run game to it. And yeah, we're going to get that big boost now with Alvin Kamara back in the mix. He's such an X factor for this team.
Yeah, and they got the ball outside a little bit on the run game, which is something I've been hoping they could do, and they just hadn't through 2 weeks. And that's where you had some success. Tony Jones had a long run on the edge. I think Kendre got out to the edge on one. But yeah, I mean, like it wasn't ever going to be perfect, right? Like you're still going in with a rookie in his first career game, and Tony Jones Jr. There's only so much you can expect. I thought, for a guy in his first career game, it's only going to get better. The moment didn't look too big for him. Let's put it that way. Like he didn't look out of place out there. It wasn't like I saw him and I was like, oh gosh, what's he going to do now? And so, yeah.
And the big thing too, not getting injured again too, because we've seen, too much of him getting, being on the sidelines and not enough in practice or at games. So bravo for staying healthy.
Yeah. He's no Devon Achan. I don't like that. But, I think the Saints he's just going to keep getting better. My last honorable mention, and we can close out on this, I'll give it to Jameis. He was in a tough situation. No one was blocking. They didn't move the ball at all in the second half. It was a struggle, right? And so like he wasn't perfect. But one thing that I've always appreciated out of Jameis, and he's shown it, is he does have that killer instinct. He does have that clutch gene where you need a drive. You need to get downfield to kick a go-ahead field goal, a touchdown. He tends to deliver. I mean, you saw that in week 1 last year, right? Like things were going very poorly. And in that fourth quarter, he did to the Falcons what the Packers did to the Saints yesterday, right? And in like 16 points, fourth quarter, it's exactly what you're talking about. I thought, what he was able to do on that last drive, he just locked in, found Chris Olave, found Mike Thomas, got into field goal range. He did enough for the Saints to make a go-ahead field goal. And so, for a guy who you're going to have to trust this week, next week, I think his I like where his mindset is. I like where he's approaching the game from. He's been in this offense. He knows how it operates. You're going to have to change things a bit for him, I think, especially in terms of the pass protection, because I don't think that he's able to handle the protections as well as Derek Carr is. But hey, maybe that helps. Maybe there's something to that where you change up how you are operating in that regard and you're able to get a little bit more done. Either way, I give Jameis a lot of credit. He hung in there. It's not his fault that they held on a long Taysom Hill run. There was a lot of penalties in the second half that torpedoed some drives. So yeah, I mean, I'm not thrilled that you have to turn to Jameis, because I think Derek Carr is a very good quarterback, and I've been really appreciative of what I've seen from him. But I think Jameis can get the job done.
You mentioned him right there, and I think he was in your 3-ups from last week. But I put an honorable mention to Michael Thomas has been really consistent these 3 games, and I think this is what we should expect to see from him throughout this season. And no knock or anything against it, but I think 5 to 8 catches a game, 50 to 70 something yards, hopefully a touchdown as well, though, in there would be nice. But Mike T for me has been really great. Happy to see him back, being healthy, and definitely targeted often when available, because he still has those reliable hands that aren't going to drop the ball.
When he gets on the field in week 4, it'll be the first time that he has been active for the first 4 games of a season since 2019.
That'll age you quick. Wow.
Yeah. So like just being out there and being effective alone, and like he, like I said, I think he's going to be a much bigger part of the offense with Jameis. Like just the way that Jameis operated in this game, you can tell like he's looking for Mike, and I think that's as much as I love Chris Olave and I like how they've been using him, I do think that working the quick game and getting Mike Thomas more involved when you are struggling to protect will be helpful. So hopefully that's something that Jameis can continue to, because I think on that last drive you saw it, they were able to get some stuff done. So that's it. That's all I got. Like I'm not trying to convince anyone that this was a good game, right? That Pete Carmichael played well, or that called a good game in that second half. That there was a ton of positives. That there was a ton of positives to take out of it, but I think there were some positives. You're going to build on this. You're 2-1. As of tonight, you could be tied for the division lead. As of Monday night, you could be tied for the division lead or behind the Bucs if they find a way to beat the Eagles. The team's just you got to keep going. You got to find ways to win these games, and that week 4 game is going to be huge. I mean, if you beat the Bucs there, that's a big tiebreaker in your pocket, because I think this Bucs team, as much as I talk crap about them, I think they're going to be here for the duration.
Big test for the Bucs. Obviously, will test definitely who they are. You mentioned Philadelphia Monday Night Football, then boom, the Saints the next week. So back-to-back fierce defenses, no doubt.
For sure. But all right, let's wrap up this episode of Inside Black and Gold. We're recording this before Dennis Allen speaks on Monday, so if there's anything that seems dated, that's why. We'll be coming back with an episode later in the week, break down any updates on Derek Carr, go through some of the film. I'll have a chance to go through a little more closely and, maybe tease out some stuff that they could do better, that went exceptionally poorly, because there was a lot that went poorly. It's almost not even notable to talk about it. There was so much of it, but we'll go through it. But thanks everyone for listening. Thanks for putting up with our kind of all over the place schedule the last few weeks. Try to be a little bit more regimented going forward to get a home game this week, so that'll be nice. But otherwise, let's do it.
Yeah, looking forward to being back home in the Dome.
Who dat? Peace, y'all.